Back in 2001, I think a lot of people thought that Papa Roach were going to be the next big thing in rock and alternative music. They were on mainstream television like Top of the Pops. They were on the soundtrack of video games such as Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, a huge commercially successful game. Every kid on the playground knew the lyrics to Last Resort and would listen to Last Resort or the album Infest on their Sony Walkman. Jerry Horton, the guitar player, wrote some really awesome riffs, so many people seem to prefer them to Limp Bizkit at the time, and Limp Bizkit were like at the height of commercial and mainstream success. In terms of new metal bands, apart from Korn and later Linkin Park, who just blew up, Limp Bizkit were just the most successful new metal band. They had the Gimmick, they were doing incredibly. Fred Durst was absolutely everywhere. He was doing duets with like Christina Aguilera. Since then, Papa Roach have still had moderate success with their sale of their albums and their streams, and also going on some awesome tours, appearing on the festival circuit, but they're not selling out arenas to the same extent like bands like Korn and Limp Bizkit are. So I'm going to delve into that a little bit on this video. I'm going to find out where they went wrong or what they did which maybe set them on a different path, a different trajectory. I still have no doubt that they're extremely popular. They have 1.3 million subscribers on YouTube, I do believe. They still put on incredible shows and people still go and see them. I'm not saying they're not a successful band. I'm just trying to find out why they weren't as successful as some of these other new metal bands like Limp Bizkit and like Linkin Park, who went on to headline festivals, be on the soundtrack of movies, all of that stuff basically. Reason number one, rapidly changing the style of their music. So let's face it, by about 2002, I think all of us were a little bit over the whole rap rock and new metal thing which was going on at the time, and a lot of people were starting to listen to a little bit more hard rock. However, throughout their career, Papa Roach have changed their sound so many times that I think it threw a lot of people off. Songs like She Loves Me Not and Getting Away with Murder had moderate success, but the albums they were on really didn't do as well as their previous efforts with the critics and also with the sales. The hard rock style, by the time they'd released the album Getting Away with Murder, was starting to become not cool anymore, and kids were starting to listen to either heavier music such as Under Oath and The Devil Wears Prada, more emo-y music such as Fall Out Boy, My Chemical Romance, Panic at the Disco, or they were listening to pop rock and indie rock as well, sadly. Along with bands like Taking Back Sunday and Thursday as well, who were blowing up at the time. Their fifth album did not sell well at all. I don't think it even charted whatsoever. And then by about 2009, they started going down this glam metal route, which again threw people off. It was getting some radio play, it was getting some TV play on channels like Kerrang and Scuzz, but again, people just weren't buying into it. Their recent music is pretty good, but they seem to be getting lumped in with bands like Falling in Reverse and Issues, those sort of Warped Tour but quite successful bands. A lot of these bands were trying to, around 2013, 2014, trying to bring back that sort of 2001, 2002 new metal style, but it seems that Papa Roach don't even want to be Papa Roach anymore, so I don't know why these bands were doing that. Papa Roach have been lumped in with them rather than being up with the gods like Korn and Limp Bizkit. If you've seen Limp Bizkit live or Korn, if you've gone and seen them at a festival or at one of their shows, it's just nuts. The crowds still love it, 19, 20 years later. Reason number two, they never became either a novelty act or a nostalgia act. Now this is in terms of marketing, music marketing, and in terms of getting people to show up to your gigs and selling tickets, which is the primary source of income for vast majority of bands these days. Limp Bizkit proved that you don't need to write incredible music to draw a crowd. And they also proved this with I think it was their 2005 album when Wes Borland had left Limp Bizkit and they recruited that guy Mike, I think. That album didn't do well at all. In fact, people weren't listening to them or talking about them at all anymore. No one really cared anymore. But Limp Bizkit always played into that nostalgia, into that gimmick. For example, in 2009 when they had reunited with Wes Borland and they put on an amazing show at Download Festival, my friends went to that show. And it was nuts. I saw the old video cam footage. I think it was like a T-Mobile Sidekick camera footage from that show. Everyone's singing along, everyone's hopping up and down. Even though they weren't on like a headlining slot at the time, people were singing along to those songs and they were absolutely loving it, playing into that nostalgia, into that gimmick. The same thing happens with bands like Kiss, for example. So Kiss, they've had a 50-year career. They've made glam rock albums, they've made heavy metal albums, they've even made grunge albums. But when you go to a Kiss show, they still wear the makeup from their 70s era, and they still play extremely similar set lists to what they were playing 20, 30, 40 years ago, because they know that's what people want to hear. They don't want to hear things from the Revenge album. The crowd doesn't want to hear too much from the solo albums. No, the crowd wants to hear those classic Kiss hits. So they put on the costumes, they put on the makeup, because that's what people want to see. If they went out and they didn't wear the makeup and they played songs which people didn't really care about, then people would be less inclined to go, to buy tickets, to go and even watch them when they headlined a festival. They'd go to the tent or go to the campsite, right? Yellow Card, Newfound Glory, and Simple Plan all did this recently as well. So they all went out on tours promoting their 2000 to 2004 material. Newfound Glory and Yellow Card, in fact, they played the entire albums in full. Even though Papa Roach have done great tours and have in fact toured with Limp Bizkit, I believe maybe 4 or 5 years ago, great idea, they're still not playing into that nostalgia enough, playing enough of that sort of stuff which made them really famous, and also just writing new music which is similar to that. And then we have the Gimmick. And now, Papa Roach didn't really have a gimmick which set them apart from other bands. For example, love it or hate it, Limp Bizkit had the most incredible gimmicks. First of all, you got Wes Borland dressing up in all his amazing outfits and his stage presence, and then you've got Fred Durst with the backwards cap, the attitude, and you got Slipknot with the masks, Simple Plan, and Blink-182 being young, good-looking guys with their long shorts. The other bands like POD and Puddle of Mudd and Stained and Papa Roach at the time didn't really have a gimmick, but not only that, because they didn't have the gimmick, they also didn't really have a lot of charisma as well. And if anyone makes a YouTube channel and they have no charisma, people don't tend to watch them. Oh god, I'm probably not going to get any views on this video, am I? You can have no gimmick, but you've got to have some charisma. And they have great stage presence and they're great musicians, but just not as charismatic as these other big acts. It's also worth mentioning that changing your sound isn't always a bad thing as well. A lot of bands do it and they get away with it. For example, Blink-182 changed their sound ever so slightly in 2003 and people actually really enjoyed it. People really liked that album. It was a bit rejected at first, but people liked it. Linkin Park started off as a rap rock nu metal band, but they changed their sound to a more, not hard rock, because that's what Papa Roach did. They changed to hard rock and people weren't really into that. Linkin Park changed to a more radio rock, mainstream rock sound, kind of similar to, I guess you could say, Nickelback, that kind of stuff that everyone can listen to. And then they got featured on the soundtrack of like the Transformers movie, and that just really blew them up. I went to see Linkin Park in 2003, and they were doing incredibly then, and then I saw them 5 years later in 2008, and the crowd was completely different. They sold out, I think it was the O2 Arena, and the crowd was so big and so diverse. There weren't just kids there like myself. I think I was 17 at the time. There was also people who were quite old, like parents and stuff, hanging out there. It certainly did help that Chester Bennington was an incredible singer. He just had like the best voice ever. They were amazing performers and they were amazing musicians, and they just wrote really good songs. The next reason is going to be, and I mentioned this in my Sum 41 video, poor timing. I briefly touched on this before, but as soon as Papa Roach became popular, they kind of missed the boat a little bit. So they became popular, but then what happened is that kind of music, that sort of rap rock, nu metal, hard rock, people weren't listening to that anymore, and the normal kids, quote unquote normal kids, and what I mean by normal is not scene kids, not punk kids, not music kids in general. The normal kids weren't listening to that anymore either. They were listening to more indie rock and pop rock. Yeah, things like the Kooks and Razorlight and yeah, just the Killers, that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't really like that stuff. I don't see the fascination, but what can you do? Aside from that, on the Reddit community, from what I've seen, a lot of people are talking about it. People are loving the new music, but a lot of people are just rejecting it. And even though they're not bad songwriters, and I really love a few of their songs, and I really like their new 2015 music, actually. If you haven't heard their new sound, here's a little bit of it. It's sounding cool. It sounds like they're kind of blending together their 2001 sound with this new sort of djenty, rocky, radio rocky sound, which is very popular, mixed with a bit of hard rock. It sounds really good, and I wish them the best, and this wasn't a criticism of them or their songwriting abilities or their singing abilities or their performance or their following or anything like that. This was just analyzing where it went different, because some of those bands completely fell off. I mean, Puddle of Mudd, for example, you know, they really struggled after 2003, 2004 because they weren't charting, and then there was some legal issues, that kind of thing. Some bands, you know, they completely fell off, they broke up altogether, or they were one-hit wonders, and then other bands just went amazing. Like even though Limp Bizkit fell off for a little while, for a few years there, maybe 2003 to 2009. After 2009, they've had a really successful touring career. Same with Korn, and also these other bands like System of a Down as well, still just doing incredible tours, Slipknot, etc. And they're still releasing music, and for the most part, it is good. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you want to subscribe for more music and drumming and drum lessons and drum covers and talks about music and the music industry, then please go right ahead. That is a great help for the channel. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.